Well, hey there. Welcome to the end of 2024, beginning of 2025. Neat games I played in 2024. Um, I took some more detailed notes this year, and we'll see if that turns into something as a positive or a negative. But a lot of games I wanted to talk about this year, and I think you'll not be shocked to learn if you've been watching the previous year's videos that a lot of these games kind of involve open worlds of some sort, and I'm very much interested in how they use their space, their physical space, how large it is, and how much they make use of it. Um, and hey, look, I got the thing. I got the icon on the picture, the box art on the screen again. Um, First thing I want to talk about, you can play this for free. It's on the rich.io page. Celeste 64 Fragments of the Mountain. I don't know if I ever talked about Celeste on this channel. Celeste is probably one of the greatest platformers ever made, just objectively speaking. It's an incredibly good platformer, and it marries its mechanics and themes together really, really well. Um, Celeste 64 is a N64 collectathon, like an hour N64 collectathon. And you may be thinking, Data or Jake, depending on your level of familiarity with me, uh, didn't you have one of those on your list last year? And you'd be right. Yes. Believe it or not, I was raised on N64 collectathon platformers, and therefore I tend to like them. um, it's again, it's small, it's dense, it's a little janky. It was made in about a week, but it plops you into a jungle gym of a hub world from which you collect strawberries, go into Mario Sunshine esque special zones that are a little more challenging, and you meet up with some of the characters from the main game and see how their lives are progressing a little while after. Um, and it's good. You can play it in an hour or two, and it's free and it's good. I like it a lot. Um, Speaking of games that are not an hour long, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Actually, I don't think I talked about Final Fantasy VII Remake because that was a 2020 game and I started doing these videos in 2021. Um, I really liked Final Fantasy VII Remake as someone who had not and has not played the original Final Fantasy VII. Um, I liked that it was 40 hours long. I loved how stylish it was. The presentation, just generally in Remake and Rebirth, is incredible, and it's me. I'm giving into astonishment. All the mega millions of AAA game development, it is working on me. Um, so Remake was highly linear. There were like two or three sections where it'd plop you into a town and be like, hey, do three side quests and then move on with the game. Rebirth builds upon that foundation and expands it out into a series of open world zones. It's got kind of an accordion structure. And from what I understand, a lot of people didn't care for that. They felt like the open world was bloated. They got kind of burned out on doing all the stuff. Couldn't be me. I loved it. I didn't. I did not get burned out. A lot of people, I think, got gave up on Gongaga. Wrong. Gongaga actually the best zone in the game. Um, it's look. I love me a checklist game, and this is an excellent checklist game. It's a beautiful checklist game, and it also kind of helped me to better understand what open world games that aren't Breath of the Wild are doing with their world design. Uh, because Breath of the Wild is a game that wants you to go off roads. It puts points of interest just kind of out in the field on tops of cliffs or whatever, and you would always basically end up riding your horse for 30 seconds and then leaving it behind and traveling for 3 hours across the mountains and ending up in a new place. That's Breath of the Wild, and that's basically no other open world game. Rebirth helped me realize that, because if you just walk along the road, occasionally you'll be like, "Hello, I'm an owl. Woo-hoo, follow me to go to a secret," and then you follow the owl and you go to the secret. And then there's some like trails of rocks or cairns or whatever, and you follow that, and there's a secret, and then you go back to the main road. Um, and it's like a guided tour basically. It's a luxury guided tour on Chocoback. And I love the world that they create here. It's clearly a love letter to this original setting, but everyone in this world is such a weirdo. The the Queen's Blood, the card game side quest, is every single character in that side quest is an absolute weirdo, and there's like 30 of them. Um, I love everything about this game except for the last couple hours, which is appropriate because that's how I felt about the remake as well. The last couple hours of these games, when they go kind of full full wackadoo, for lack of not going any further spoilers, do not work for me. It's kind of like the second half of the last rebuild of Evangelion movie. It's just this is where they lose me. But there was 95 hours of really fun open world checklist for me to do before that, so I'm gonna buy the next one day one and probably not like the end of that either, but love the rest. um, and last thing I noted in my notes here, if Dark Souls 3 is a cry for help of trying to escape its franchise, if Xenoblade 3 is a celebration that tells its own story, Rebirth is just pouring millions of dollars into self-indulgent fan service, and it 100% works on me, someone who has no nostalgia for the original. um, Speaking of From Software, Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree. Hey, it's good. Shock and awe, amazing. From Software made a good game. The follow-up expansion to Elden Ring, one of the biggest games of all time, is really good. What an amazing concept. Yeah, of course, it's good. I think this is better than the base game. You may recall my criticism of the base game was that it didn't really do a whole lot with its open world, and I think that was partly me still in Breath of the Wild brain, because I kept going off the path expecting there to be interesting things, and that's not how Elden Ring works. Shadow of the Erdtree makes, I think, the good creative decision to narrow those spaces a little bit. It returns back to the George Weeben of Super Bunny Hop calls it like spaghetti in a glass world design of not so much these wide open areas, but a lot of kind of intertwining, twisting, narrow paths that make it feel like a labyrinth, even if the artistic direction is still the most spacious and grandiose and epic that the From Software has done so far. It's still got instant free fast travel, which is just all that intertwining interconnection doesn't mean anything if you can just teleport everywhere. And so no, it's not as good as Dark Souls 1, and it never will be. um, but yeah, it's phenomenal. It's beautiful. I didn't beat the final boss because life is too short, but I really enjoyed the road along the way. I hope that whatever Souls-esque thing they do next, other than the whatever that dumbass multiplayer thing that I don't care about is, it takes inspiration from this and learns the right lessons, and maybe also gets rid of instant fast travel from the beginning of the game. Just saying. Dragon's Dogma 2! Hey, I never played the original Dragon's Dogma. I owned it on Steam for many years and never installed it, never booted it up. But I heard it was for the sickos, and as I heard Dragon's Dogma 2 is for those same sickos, and they did not compromise on making a game for the Dragon's Dogma sickos. And I was like, I wonder if I'm a Dragon's Dogma sicko. And so I tried it out, and I'm sort of a little bit not. I did not finish this game. I did not even come close to finishing this game, but I played 30 really good hours of this game. What makes Dragon's Dogma stand out, in addition to having a really dense world map while also being big and having limited fast travel, and it's what stands out. People are going to talk about the pawn system. The pawn system's fine. Um, is all these different sources of friction that it creates for the player. In a gaming landscape that is so much about player convenience, player ease, um, completionism, right? Dragon's Dogma flies in the face of all that. I mentioned extremely limited fast travel. Nighttime, it's so dark you literally cannot see, and ghosts will come out and kill you. Do not go out after dark. The save system is harsh, for lack of a better word. They're soft saves, but hard saves only come every like couple hours, if I remember right. Um, and then there's some stuff that I don't want to spoil that may very well and justifiably be a breaking point for certain players. I will also say the PC version crashed a lot on my machine. I don't know if that's the case on all machines or on the console versions. Um, but I really appreciated those sources of friction. I was just complaining about all the fast travel in Elden Ring. This really feels like you're going on an expedition. If you're heading to the next town, you gotta, you know, go on a little bit of a journey, even if you've been there before. Um, Even taking a caravan, you might get attacked by monsters along the way. It's cool. It's cool. It's if it intrigues you, check it out. Don't feel like a failure if it's not for you or if you give up on it. It's very much playing in that friction zone, and I think that's what makes it neat. I played some Zelda games. I played a bunch of Zelda games this year. Only finished some of them, but the two that I want to talk about are the original Legend of Zelda and Majora's Mask, because here I am talking about game space again, right? I think the original Legend of Zelda is a really coolly structured game that sucks to play. I've been saying this for years. I hate how it controls. I hate that there's no diagonal movement and that you can only stab rather than slash. It's a nightmare to play. Um, but it's got this really cool system where well, it's not a system, a layout, map, where basically the entire overworld is open to you at all times, and your ability to access it is actually not restricted by items all that much. Instead, there are some zones that are just really, really dangerous, right? Deadly. And until you get the right sword upgrades and enough heart pieces, you're gonna have a bad time. So one of the first things I did, I'm pulling out my notebook here. I drew my own map of the overworld and labeled it with all the dungeons. This was really cool. This was really fun. This brought me back to playing Tunic a couple years ago. Scratched that same itch. Um, Ultimately, it just kind of sucks to play though. So I beat the main dungeons, but didn't do Death Mountain. Um, but so it's again gates progression based solely on how strong you are, which I think is really interesting in comparison to Majora's Mask, which has a whole lot of diegetic lock and key progression blocking, right? And uh, I knew this, but I didn't. It didn't click in my brain in a particular way until playing it for the recent recompilation release, which is really good, by the way. If you haven't played Majora's Mask in a while, that's a great way to play it. Um, but so like, Zelda dungeons classically have been like, okay, there's a locked door, you go over here, you grab a key, you bring the key, open the door, move on to the next part of the dungeon. That's the basic loop of the dungeon. Ocarina of Time also does this, but Majora's Mask basically structures its overworld like this. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole, but just think about how many nested locks and keys are required to get out of Clock Town in that first cycle. You got to get up to the top of the clock tower, To get up there, you need to get the flower. To get the flower, you need the moon's tear. To get the moon's tear, you need to get into the bomber's hideout. To get to the bomber's hideout, you need magic. To get magic, you need to, right? Um, but because it's all diegetic, and at least the first time you're exploring and playing the game, it all feels very natural compared to a door with a lock on it or an invisible wall and an NPC saying no. So that's cool. It's two different ways of limiting player progression. I think they're both valid. I think they're both interesting. I would love to see more of both. I'm already past my usual time, and I haven't even started talking about trails. um, I'm gonna keep it positive here. Uh, Trails of Cold Steel 4 is a very flawed game. I think it has to clean up a lot of the mess of the previous game, which I was really, really negative on. But to keep it positive, I think Trails of Cold Steel is really impressive as a franchise, and 4, I'm not going to say it sticks the landing because 3 already stumbled, but the they've set up so many plot threads, so many characters, all these different elements, and Trails of Cold Steel 4 does manage to tie up basically all those loose ends. It dots its I's and crosses its T's, and sometimes it feels like you're doing nothing but dotting I's and crossing T's. But it did do the dang thing. And this is a relatively low budget game that was made in what 2 years. These games come out 2 years apart, I think, roughly. Um, and so the fact that this team managed to make a game of this scope is impressive, even if I disagree with some of the creative choices along the way, and even if the polish is really not there. Um, Also, I made this meme. I thought it was funny. Trails into Reverie. So I have to talk about how. So there in Trails there are setup games, there are climax games, and then every once in a while you'll get you might call it an epilogue slash prologue game that essentially provides a denouement for the arc that has just passed while setting up threads for what is to come. And Reverie is that. Reverie provides epilogues for most of the main characters from the past 9 games, while also seeding what is yet to come. And while I still have my issues with it, I think it ends pretty darn well. It manages to tie the 3 main plot lines together thematically quite well in its final scenes, and it provides a denouement. And after how exhausting and action-packed the previous games have been and focused on the central conflict rather than the characters, I would argue, Reverie is about the characters, or rather, it has a lot of content about the characters in addition to its main story. And I really appreciate that. This is probably the post game optional content in this game is some of the best that the series has been in the past couple of games. So I just want to note as a work of art, right? As this is the end of the first half of this overarching story, is my understanding, and again brings together and provides closure on the past 9-10 games. I do think that this game and this franchise provided me an emotional experience. I am emotionally invested in these characters, in this world, in these games. But the other day I was looking up relaxing Trails music to have on while I was doing my D&D prep, and I got nostalgic looking at some scenes from Cold Steel 1, where I began this Trails journey a couple years ago. And I thought about, gosh, things were so much simpler then. Things were so much less convoluted and exhausting. They were just some kids being thrust into a world that was far bigger than them. And gosh, that must be how the characters feel as well, right? And I thought that was meaningful and effective art. Um, okay, some quick honorable mentions. We're past 20 minutes now. Are these going to get longer and longer every year? Gosh, I hope not. Arzette, Jewel of Fairmore. I think that's a cool game that exists. It's a passion project that's done with a ton of love, and it was a neat way to spend a couple hours. Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. I'm glad it exists. I hope they get to make more. Shadow of Generations, the best Sonic game since the game that it's bundled with. And Stardew Valley, I played one night of it. It's dangerous. I don't know if I'm willing to risk going back. um, and that's 2024. I hope that 2025 brings good things. The video games should be good, though, at least. All right. Be good to yourself, and I'll see you next year.